A movement is defined as a group with common ideology, especially a religious or political one, or the organized action of such a group. When I think of movements, the first one that comes to mind is the women's liberation movement. Secondly, the civil rights movement of the 1960s. And lastly, the lesbian and gay rights movements. So where does intellectual property rights movements fit in with this? Intellectual property is the ownership of particular items of knowledge, ideas, or cultural production. Some forms of intellectual property could be music, text, film, recordings, software, chemical compounds, or even genetic material. Intellectual property rights, or IPRs, are protected here in Canada through a system of copyrights, patents, trademarks, and trade secret laws. Copyrights are the oldest of these protections, granting authors and proprietors a right to print, reprint, or publish their work for a period of 14 years. Patents, on the other hand, are there for the inventors. A patentable invention is any new or useful art, machine, manufacture, or composition of matter, or any new or useful improvement thereof. Recently, they've replaced the word art with process. The biggest threat to intellectual property rights is the internet. With just a point and a click, millions and millions of users now have access to images, sounds, recordings, movies, software. With so much access and so much globalization and global access, there's no wonder that people are thinking it is the threat. Today, individuals and rights watch groups are vigilant about technological infringements on rights. Whereas in the past, technology may have had an indirect effect on rights, today those effects are direct. Every group of rights, from inalienable rights to individual rights to human rights or social contract or moral rights, in some way are affected by technology. The main technology that has this effect is the internet. And the one watch group that has a key effect on this is the public knowledge movement. The public knowledge movement preserves the openness of the internet and the public's access to knowledge, promotes creativity through balanced copyright, and upholds and protects the rights of consumers to use innovative technology lawfully. The reason the internet is such a threat is because intellectual properties are so reproducible, and the internet allows that avenue for reproduction. The most highly publicized example of intellectual property being shared and reproduced was in 2000. Metallica and its record label sued Napster, a file-sharing site, for allowing its users to share Metallica's music. Metallica wanted over 300,000 users disconnected. This forced Napster to stop, but the public backlash to the music industry still exists today. Even though the open source movement began before the Napster and Metallica incident, this incident brought light to the movement. The open source movement targets software, but should be viewed as a movement for open knowledge. The open source movement is a broad-reaching movement of individuals who support the use of open source licenses for some or all software. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, two different groups were establishing the roots of the current open source software movement. On the East Coast, Richard Stallman, formerly an MIT grad, created the GNU Project and the Free Software Foundation. The GNU Project was aimed to create a free operating system and used the GNU General Public License as software license to prohibit proprietarization of software but allow redistribution and modification. On the West Coast, the Computer Science Research Institute of the University of California at Berkeley was adding improvements to the original Unix operating system from AT&T and developed many applications which became known as BSD Unix. These efforts were funded mainly by DARPA contracts, and a dense network of Unix hackers around the world helped to debug, maintain, and improve the system. From these humble beginnings, the open source movement has allowed the public access to software and products free of charge and IPRs. Some examples are Linux operating system, Apache, Blender, OpenOffice, Mozilla, and even the most widely used one today, Wikipedia. My own personal view is that IPRs are a good thing for individuals, but are normally spearheaded by corporations to maintain the capitalist rights they have. I feel that the open source movement actually can push these boundaries that corporations have created. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to view and listen to my brief overview of intellectual property rights, the public knowledge movement, and the open source movement.